Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I have a card for the latest lawnscaping challenge to use texture. So I'm going to be using some texture paste and embossing paste on my card to get some effects in the background here. And I'm starting with the Booyah stamp set from Lawn Fawn, and I will be creating a background for it using Distress inks and also this star stencil from Wow Studios. To create the distress background, I'm using Mermaid Lagoon, Chipped Sapphire, and Dusty Concord. I wanted to have that strong purple color and give a slightly more blue effect to the sky than a black effect to the night sky, just because I thought that it would help the ghost pop more and kind of stay with that fun look, even though it's maybe not as realistic. And I think that the Chipped Sapphire blends into the purple quite easily. The Chipped Sapphire is actually a new color to me. I know that it's been around for a long time, but I really like it for the dark night skies. It's a much deeper blue than the Faded Jeans, which I'd had previously. I find that there's always a purpose for each color of distress, and so, and with the adding the last color, the Mermaid Lagoon, I only added just a hint of that at the bottom. I didn't divide the space evenly, and in fact most of the space winds up being that Chipped Sapphire, and that's just because I thought that while I wanted that brightness, it wasn't quite as light, and so I thought if I mix the Mermaid Lagoon, which is really bright blue, with the Chipped Sapphire, that I would get an effect that I would like, and it turns out well, but I layered the Chipped Sapphire over the Mermaid Lagoon to blend it out. And then I just felt like I had taken away a little too much purple, so I added a touch more. But as you can see, most of it is pretty dominated by that Chipped Sapphire. I'm going to be adding some embossing powder, so I wanted to make sure that my distress was completely dry. And so I hit it with the heat gun before moving on. I've taped down this stencil, and what I like about this particular stencil is it is really thick, which means that it's going to work really well with embossing paste, and I'm not going to have to worry about the embossing paste seeping under it. It's probably about twice as thick as your average stencil, so that was an interesting feature to me, and I'm still curious about how it will work putting distress ink through the stencil though, as it might be a little bit harder because of the thickness, but it was an advantage for embossing paste. And that was just the Dreamweaver's embossing paste, but of course you could always just use spackling from the hardware store. I was able to recently get a deal on the Dreamweavers though, so I did pick that up. And I find they work pretty similar, although the Dreamweavers is a little bit creamier. I don't know that it's completely worth the difference in price. I'm going to be using some glitter embossing powder from Ranger. I'm not quite sure what the name of this color is, but it's a nice mix and includes some greens and is pretty sparkly and iridescent. But what I found here was that traditionally embossing powder in this case would just stick to where the embossing paste is. However, I think because it's glitter, it has a little bit more static going on, and so it's sticking everywhere because I wasn't able to, I forgot to use the static bag before I did the embossing paste. And so that I think is part of it, but also if the distress ink isn't completely dry, and just that glitter generally tends to go everywhere. So I say that to warn you that this is going to be extremely messy and it's going to get glitter everywhere. But if you really like that sparkly look, and this might be a fun way for you to achieve it, and also it adds just a little something to have that glitter not just be in like a mist form, but for it to be actual flakes of glitter. And if you wanted to do, I guess, a less messy alternative, then I would suggest instead of adding glitter embossing powder to use like something like Perfect Pearls, which is like a spray mist glitter that won't quite get all over your work surface. So I had decided that I was going to use the Hey Ghoul Friend because I thought I could use this card before Halloween in that sense. It doesn't explicitly say Happy Halloween, but to give something at the beginning of the month of October, a little, so that my cousin could display it for a while, because a lot of times when I send her a card, she likes to have it out for a little bit, and so this way I can send it a little bit earlier in the month. And I decided to stamp some of the faces on there. What I like about this Booyah stamp set is that the faces are separate from the ghosts, and so you can add whichever face you like to the ghost that you're using, and you don't have to be limited with the direction they're facing and that sort of thing. Plus, then you can use those faces on other critters from other stamp sets. Lately, Lawn Fawn has been keeping the faces separate in some of the stamp sets. Like I was thinking about that Gumball stamp set that was released recently, and again the faces are separate. I think the scale's probably a little bit different, and these two particular sets might not interchange, Booyah and then the Gumball stamp set, but there are some. There's like the Sushi stamp set also, I think the faces are separate. So just to keep that in mind for a little bit more options, or if you wanted to go back and add these little vampire face to some of the other stamp sets. For the Frankenstein, I found that the G02 and G0 combination, or sorry, G00 combination was pretty good because it has that slightly kind of mint side to it and not quite that teal, and it matched up well with the particular glitter embossing powder that I was using. And for the blacks, I'm not going to color it solid black, generally with Copics. If you want the look of black, you're better off combining some of the grays and using some of the darkest grays. The darkest gray I have is W7, so that's what I use, but you can go darker as well. And I chose the W markers just because, again, I have a slightly higher up darker marker in those. I don't have the C's in as high of numbers, so I can't get quite the same look of black. Also, I think that it pairs up well with the generally warmer feel of the Distress Ink line. And so I'm going to use that same color combination on the hat. Since these are relatively small areas, I am going to just use 2 markers to blend rather than the traditional 3 markers. And I will be cutting these out with the coordinating dies, so I have to stay inside the lines. Sometimes I go back and forth about whether coordinating dies are best because on simple stamps like these, sometimes I feel like it might be faster to just cut these out, and then I wouldn't have to worry about coloring inside the lines, which would save me some time with my coloring. But then when you go into this stamp set, you'll see some of the images would be really easy to cut out, like the hat and even the ghost bodies. And then there's a lot of really detailed images in the stamp set, like the little hook and that sort of thing. So, overall, I think that those coordinating dies are very helpful. Although I hear you can also use your silhouette to cut out stamped images, which is pretty intriguing, as I can see that saving quite a bit of money. Now, for my sentiment, I'm going to use white heat embossing powder on black cardstock. I'm kind of new to white heat embossing powder because I was having a hard time finding one that I liked, and so I ordered a whole bunch and tried them out, and I found that the Hero Arts white embossing powder gave the clearest and strongest white, and it was generally didn't stick too much. A lot in the past, either they stuck in places I didn't want them to, or they didn't give a really bright white. The Hero Arts gave the brightest white. The Simon Says Stamp embossing powder was pretty good too, but it wasn't quite as bright in my personal opinion. And so I went with the Hero Arts here. Now, like I said before, that glitter is getting everywhere. And my panel here has been off to the side to dry for a while, but every time I touch it, it's getting glitter everywhere. So I just decided to take an old makeup brush and try to brush off as much of that glitter as possible. I keep some extra cheap brushes that I'm not using on hand in my craft space for these sort of cleanup things, like if I spill embossing powder, to sort of just sweep it up. So you'll see that I have a large paintbrush that I picked up at the dollar store, just especially for cleaning up those little messes. Although I've seen these really cute little tiny dustpan and broom sets, and that might be a good way to do that as well. So I just cut some banners inside of that sentiment, and then I'm ready to assemble my card. I do want to have the ghosts popped up, but I want to have their accessories laying flat on them. So I'm going to first use multimedia matte to glue the accessories to the ghosts. And I'm working, as always, on my Ranger craft sheet. One of the other advantages of the Ranger craft sheet is in this instance where if a little bit of glue leaks out onto the surface, I can just wipe it away easily and it won't stick to other elements of my project. Once I have all their accessories assembled onto them, I'm ready to add some foam tape. I have one of those large rolls of Scotch foam tape, and I'm just cutting it down so that I can easily fit it behind all those accessories, I want to make sure to support all areas of the ghosts, and so I've cut some really thin pieces, for instance, behind that broom. And if you had larger embossed areas, you might have a little bit of trouble with them sticking flat with the foam tape. However, because the embossed areas are relatively small, I didn't have trouble with that. I felt like it needed just a little bit of a finishing touch, and one of the things that I like about Lawn Fawn is they tend to include small little hearts and stars in a lot of their sets. And even though you probably have a million little heart stamps, to have it right there in the stamp set that you're already working with is super convenient in my opinion. And so I just use the VersaFine ink to stamp a few hearts in some of the empty spaces just to try to fill up the space more and to add a little love element to it. And generally I would try to stamp some hearts off of the panel, but because it's already attached to the card, I just kept them in the center. And so that is it for my card today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I'm going to leave you a link to the Lawnscaping Challenge so that you can head on over and join in this textured challenge. If you want to see some more crafting videos, including Lawn Fawn and Distress ink and other mixed media techniques, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Bye.